I'm a student here at Jones Technical Institute. In today's video, we're going to be doing some suspension component identification. Okay, so we have here our international truck. You can see right here in this back, this tube coming down. That's our steering column. It comes from the firewall and then leads up to the actual steering wheel inside. Attached to it, you've got a couple of U-joints right here. A U-joint that connects it to our steering box. This is where it's got a little worm gear in there. As you turn it, it'll move this piece right here. This is called the pitman arm. This is what turns our rotational movement from our steering wheel into lateral movement. And it's connected over here to the drag link. Our drag link is connected straight to our knuckles there. That's the top part right there, the steering knuckle. Inside our steering knuckle, we've got a couple bushings and a kingpin that ties everything together. The kingpin is held in by some draw keys. And that's what keeps the kingpin in its place, aside from the covers on the kingpin itself. It's got some grease fittings on the top and bottom to keep that bushing working as it should. The drag link is connected to the knuckle using a ball joint, and it's got a castle nut on the top of it, a little cotter key on it as well. Right underneath it, this part right here, this is our axle, okay? And this looks like a setback axle because it's got a wider top and a narrow on the bottom. So attached to our axle are these U-bolts. These U-bolts are keeping our leaf springs in place and secured to our axles. Okay, now right behind that we have our shock absorber. This part right here is a little bit dark, but this is our shock absorber right there, and that kind of controls the bounce as we're riding down the road. Okay, now these are all things that you need to inspect before you do an alignment. Another thing that you should do before an alignment, before you even get into inspecting all of this, you should be checking your toe. Okay, the toe basically means the angle of the wheels as you're looking at it from the front, right? So if your wheels are kind of pigeon-toed like this, that means you've got toe in, and if they're sticking out in the front, that means you got toe out. Now these vehicles need to have toe in to keep them tracking straight down the road. Okay, so you would take your measurement from the center line of the wheel. Basically, for you to get that, you'd have to measure out these wheels. These wheels are 9 inches long, so you'd measure in about 4.5 inches down the center. Lay down some tape on the front and back, and you'd measure the distances. Measure the difference in the distance between the front and the back. That'll tell you whether you've got toe in or toe out. Okay. What else we got to inspect here? Oh, here in the back, we've got to inspect. We have to make sure that everything's up to our proper air pressure for the airbags to be filled up. Make sure that the ride height is the airbag that controls the ride height is properly inflated. Make sure it's not leaking. Make sure none of the airbags are leaking. You also have to make sure that the vehicle is unloaded. Basically, that means that the suspension has been settled, and for you to get an unloaded vehicle, say it's early in the morning, and you've got to bring a shop in, you've got to do this alignment, but you need it to be on an unloaded vehicle. Basically, you would just put it into first gear and just slowly let off the clutch and let it coast in. Okay. As soon as you start pushing on the gas, you're starting to put tension on those suspension components, and then at that point you've got a loaded vehicle, is what it's called, and you can't be taking measurements off that because your measurements are going to be off from a loaded vehicle. So very important to unload the vehicle, let it coast in, let everything settle to its normal stance, and then you're going to start taking your measurements. You're going to start with your toe in, and then you're going to do your pre-alignment inspection, which is basically looking at all those components I just talked about, making sure that they're good in good condition, make sure nothing has any cracks, bends, breaks, make sure that the rubber's still good on these different components, make sure that you don't have no looseness in anything. You have to go down underneath the, oh, you know what, let's show the cross tubes real quick. I didn't show this part. I got to get down a little bit. Alright, so down from back here, behind the axle, we've actually got the Ackerman arm. Ackerman arm goes behind the axle, and there's a cross tube right here. This is what I got my hand on. This cross tube has the tie rods on the ends of them. You have to inspect them. And basically what you're going to do under there is you're going to grab the cross tube, you're going to give it a little bit of rotation, and that's okay. It's supposed to do that. It's when you've got excessive rotation going back and forth, that's when you've got a problem. Another thing that you're going to do is you're going to push up and down on them, and that's going to be testing out the ball joints that are connected from the Ackerman arm, connecting from the tie rods to the Ackerman arm. If you have some play in that, that means that those ball joints are bad. You got to replace those. The ball joint is supposed to move around on itself, but it's not supposed to pop in and out of that socket. Okay, that's another real important part of your free alignment inspection. You're supposed to check also on the cross tubes. It's got a little slit on the side of it where you can see the tie rods where they've threaded into it, and you're not supposed to have any kind of gaps in there. Your tie rods are not supposed to be so far out that the cross tube could actually end up breaking them off if it bounces too hard. Okay, so you got to make sure that you have the proper tie rods in place, and that the proper tie rods are being used for the vehicle itself. You've also got to check the manufacturer specs, because a lot of these frames, they've got a natural toe-in built into them. Okay, so once you go to set things up, you have to make sure you check your manufacturer specs, see how much toe-in you're allowed. And if it's out of that spec, then you've got to tow them back in. If they're towed out, they'll start to wander, they'll start to eat your tires away, start losing fuel economy. It might even start darting around. So if you're darting around, that means that when you're in the middle of a wheel, or if you're just riding down the road, it'll just jerk suddenly to left or right. And definitely sketch, do not want that. Another thing to check is your proper tire inflation. You've got to make sure that your wheels are in good condition. You have to check with your tread depth gauge. You're going to take 3 measurements, usually on that outer tread, on the inner, or on the furthest inner tread, and somewhere along the middle. And what you do is you take those 3 numbers, you add them together, divide it by 3, and you get the median. Okay, and that median is what's going to be your actual tire depth. All right, so tires very, very important to inspect. Your ride height, all these unit components, very important to check. This has been component identification along with our pre-alignment inspection. Thanks for watching, guys.